a broader tax reform where it would cover many more provisions than just these. You know, we'd be talking about individual and business rates. The goal, generally speaking, I think there's a fair consensus that the tax code is too complicated and it should be slimmed down. And I know a number of folks on both the House and Senate sides want to get the provisions to be a little bit more, as they think, rational and not so much loopholes. So with that as background, let me talk about the tax reform versus tax extenders debates. This has been going on for a couple of years. On the House side, the chairman of the House Ways and Means Committee, Dave Camp from Michigan, has been working the longest and probably the hardest to put together a broad proposal that could move in the House side. He just recently issued a pretty dramatic reform program that was reasonably well received by a lot of observers, even though it would strike these tax incentives that we're talking about here. So that's the downside there. On the Senate side, Senator Baucus last year made an awful lot of progress and issued a number of white papers on various aspects of the tax code, including one on energy taxes. Since the day after he published the energy tax paper, it was announced that he was going to become the ambassador to China. So I don't know if you can draw a parallel between getting involved in tax reform and being banished to Beijing, but I don't know. Either way, that is, on the Senate side, the primary document that we're concerned with relating to taxes. It's the piece of paper that's out there relating to tax reform, and it's got some concepts in it that are good, but also some concepts that are not so good. One, it changes the way that the tax credits would be implemented. Any fuel that's about 25% cleaner than conventional gasoline would generally receive the credit, and the cleaner and more energy efficient the fuel, the larger the credit. So there's a lot of calculations going into that, and cleanliness is going to be defined as how clean a fuel production process is on life cycle basis. So you can see it's not just taking fuel A and providing credit B to it. It's much more process and much more life cycle cost analysis, a lot more ability for EPA or DOE or other agencies of government to get involved in how those calculations are made. It's also not a fuel use credit. That's the way it is now. It would be a production tax credit or an investment tax credit, which is from an industry like the propane industry, one that's a little bit less motivating to those that are interested in purchasing equipment. That's on the downside. On the upside, there's what they call a transition rule, which would extend the existing credits until 2016. So there would be a 3-year period where these tax credits would continue to exist, and before the new regulatory regime would take effect. Now that I don't know if it's really going anywhere, because Senator Baucus is gone, and so now Senator Wyden from Oregon has taken over the chairmanship of the Senate Finance Committee, and he probably has his own ideas about what to do with taxes, and we're not really sure what those ideas are. So we have to learn more what he thinks. I mean, he has a strong environmental record, so we're going to have to wait and see a little bit to find out just where Senator Wyden wants to go with this type of thing. Now you rewind a couple of months on the Senate side. Right before the end of the year, Senator Reid, Majority Leader Reid, tried to move an extenders bill through the Senate, but the Republicans objected, so that bill did not go anywhere. Again, you see the same partisan gap on the House side, where there are a lot of people. It doesn't necessarily break down quite as neatly on the House side as it does on the Senate side, but on the House side you have advocates of extending the tax credits, and you also have those who are absolutely opposed to extending the tax credits. But then there's another group in there where they support the tax credits and probably would if it weren't for the political aspects going into the election of the tax credits. So, you know, at this point, what I see happening is the Senate will be ready to move, and they may actually move something early next month. And on the House side, you probably won't see much of anything until after the election, when a lame duck session would come up. So that's a long-winded way of working my way through the first slide, and I frankly may have covered some of the other topics on the other slides. Not really, but this is sort of a list of the credits, all of which have expired. Obviously, you know, I speak from experience on the propane side, but there's also natural gas credits, both liquefied and compressed, biodiesel credits, all these other infrastructure credits and things like that. One thing, unfortunately, that has dropped out from the last couple of years has been the vehicle credit itself for alternative fuel vehicles. It's been gone for a couple of years now. That would really be a boon, I think, and I think the natural gas folks and we would agree that that's something that's sorely missed these days. Next slide. I think I talked a little bit about this. You have some folks that just will not support extenders. I think generally speaking they are mostly Republicans. And I think generally speaking Democrats are favorably disposed to supporting extension of tax credits. They're, as a category, usually more supportive of an activist government, of policies that intervene in the marketplace to support clean fuels in this case. And so we've gotten most of our support expressed from Democrats. So I think when it comes to what we're asking for, part of it depends on what happens on the Senate committee, but I think generally speaking, extension of the existing regime of tax credits will be the most helpful and the least disruptive to our various industries and our various programs of any action that Congress could take this year. So I guess with that, I'll sort of tie things up there. Maybe ask Ken or Paul or Ben if they have anything they'd like to add on to what I just said.
Paul, why don't you go ahead?
Phil, you did a great job. The two things I wanted to add on to it is that all our trade associations, whether it's electric, propane, biodiesel, or natural gas, we're all working together actually to on these tax extenders. So when we go in and talk to the offices and the staff on the committees and on the Senate and House members, we all talk about these credits that we're all looking forward on top of the to get these extenders extended in the extenders package. On the vehicle credit, I just wanted to say that we too in the natural gas vehicle industry are disappointed those credits expired at the end of 2010. However, in the President's budget proposal that he came up with earlier this month, there is a proposal in there to provide tax credits for medium and heavy-duty alternative fueled vehicles, which includes both the propane and the LNG and CNG ones. So, you know, there is the President is looking on what the future of that those credits are, and his proposal are. Probably, you know, I can't speculate on right now, but at least, you know, the President is fully committed to our industries. I'll leave it to Ken or Ben for next.
Ben, you want to say anything about from the biodiesel industry's perspective on the tax incentives?
No, I think you guys did a really good job covering it. I mean, I think we're just in the same boat as everybody else. It just creates a lot of, wreaks a lot of havoc on the markets when these things come in and out every year. So I think that pretty much covers it.
Great. And I just want to clarify just a couple of things. One is it's cut off on your slide, but actually the hydrogen and fuel cell credit does not expire till the end of this year, so that is in place right now. though it's going to run into the same issues at the end of this year. Secondly, just to clarify that the plug-in hybrid credit also is still in place for plug-in electric vehicles and plug-in hybrids because it's based on not a date but volume of vehicles sold. So that credit is in place for each manufacturer until they've sold 200,000 vehicles. However, the electric vehicle industry is affected significantly by the expiration of the alternative fuel infrastructure credit, which is very beneficial in terms of installing electric vehicle charging stations. So I just wanted to clarify those. And secondly, I guess I just want to also emphasize that while there may be somewhat more unity amongst Democrats in favor of the extending the incentives, I do think there is bipartisan support for these incentives, but that it may take a while for that bipartisan support to actually push us to the finish line. So I think there will certainly be a lot of debate on this, and even if these incentives don't get extended or the extension of them doesn't get extended until the end of the year, it's very critical for people to be educating your members of Congress that these incentives are important because in the current climate, those incentives that don't have people speaking up for them are going to be the ones that get eliminated. And the last time around when they did extend tax incentives, which was at the end of 2012, there were a number of tax incentives, not ones for alternative fuels, but for other industries that did not get extended because there wasn't enough support for them. So the support does matter. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Ben Evans from the National Biodiesel Board to give us an update on the renewable fuel standard.
Thank you, Ken, and thanks for having us on the call today, and thanks for all of you for participating. I would definitely echo what Ken just said about how important it is for the members, even members who may be critics of some of these programs, to hear from you guys and to hear from folks in their own districts and in their own states about how these things have an impact, in their own backyard. So, appreciate you guys having an interest in it and coming to DC to make your voice heard on it. So I'm going to just try to run through a quick update on what's going on with the RFS today. I'm sure you all have heard a lot about the recent EPA proposal on the RFS. I think it's safe to say, speaking on behalf of all renewable fuels and biofuels, that the RFS really is our tippy-top priority. It is the backbone of the industry right now, and is what is really driving growth and investment in the industry. And so we are tremendously concerned about the proposal that came out from the EPA late last year with some pretty significant cuts in the proposal under the RFS. Just I'll run through in a couple of slides later. I'll have some details on what the actual cuts are to which categories, but just some sort of logistics. The final rule was proposed. The rule was proposed in November on the RFS, setting the volumes for 2014. The comment period closed January 28th, I believe, but we're probably not going to see a final rule. I think the EPA has essentially said they want to see it, they hope to finalize it in the spring, which they define as on or before midnight on June 20th. So it'll be a few more months before we see this rule finalized, and we know that there are still a lot of, even though the formal comment period is closed, there's still a lot of internal deliberations going on, and there's plenty of opportunity to make our voice heard as supporters of the RFS to push for a better final rule. They will be working on this behind the scenes for the next few months. And I think we all know that how much the RFS has been under attack by the oil industry, and I think they've done an effective job in sort of making it seem as if the RFS isn't working or is somehow broken. But if you really look at it, the RFS is working. It's doing just what Congress intended for it to do 10 years ago. It's creating jobs. It's reducing oil imports. It's creating domestic energy security, and it's reducing emissions. So all of that is happening because of the RFS, and we need to do a better job of getting that message out there. So please, as you're visiting, your folks on the Hill, I think the ask is to pressure them, to ask them to support a strong RFS and to push the White House and the EPA to fix this proposal and to make a better RFS proposal that supports renewable fuels. We can go to the next slide there, Ken. This slide just sort of steps back. I think most folks on the call know how the RFS works in general, but I think this slide does a good job of sort of explaining. The RFS is broken up essentially into two categories. You have conventional biofuels, which have to meet a 20% greenhouse gas emissions reduction as defined by the EPA, and then you've got an advanced biofuels category that has to meet a 50% greenhouse gas reduction. The conventional side is mostly corn-based ethanol, if not all corn-based ethanol, and that was really what the first phase, if you will, of the RFS was all about, was building up the conventional and the corn ethanol category, and that growth happened between 2005 and still going on, but starting in 2015. That conventional category stops at 15 billion gallons, and it's capped there. And where the real growth in the second phase of the RFS is in the advanced biofuels. And then you have several categories of advanced biofuels. You have biomass-based diesel, which includes biodiesel and renewable diesel. You have cellulosic ethanol. You have others, such as a lot of various different types of fuels. Sugarcane ethanol is a big one. That also qualify as advanced biofuels and meet that 50% threshold. And that really, you can see there, 21 billion gallons by 2022. That's where the tremendous growth is expected in the RFS over the next 10 years. We have seen that cellulosic ethanol has been a little slower to develop than many had expected, and that has caused some concerns. And I think most folks would acknowledge that is going to cause the EPA to revise some of these numbers as the years go on, particularly as you have really big numbers for cellulosic ethanol in 2 or 3 years, jumping up, 5-7 billion gallons. And I think if there's still delayed, production at that time, I think, you'll see the EPA. They already have the authority to reduce that, and I think they will do that in a responsible way. They've been doing that for the past couple of years. But our problem is, and I think everybody with this RFS proposal is that there is really no reason to reduce this now. And we can go to the next slide, Ken. And this lays out sort of the different categories and what the EPA has proposed in terms of volumes. But you can see there's cuts pretty much across the board. And the bottom line is you have the total RFS down there at the bottom. The 2014 proposal is for 15.2 billion gallons. The statutory expectation when Congress passed the law was 18 billion gallons, and last year the actual production was 16.55 billion gallons. So you're looking at a cut of almost a 1.5 billion gallons from last year's actual production, and that is clearly very difficult for all of the fuels involved. I can speak mostly to biodiesel. Biodiesel, the industry had a record year last year of 1.8 billion gallons. It's the best year we've ever had. And the proposal is for a 1.28 billion gallon, to hold the RFS requirement flat at 1.28 billion gallons. And if that takes hold, that is going to cause significant contraction in the market and real hardship for biodiesel producers across the country. I've talked to at least a half dozen biodiesel producers who say that the proposal alone, regardless of whether it's finalized, has made them, at least delay or cancel any expansion plans that they might have been thinking of. And we know that's going on. And then in addition to that, it just sends a terrible market signal to the renewable fuels industry and to investors in the industry about where the administration is heading on this. I mean, the administration has been incredibly supportive over the years until this came out. And so, it's just a really damaging proposal, and we think the industry has proven that it can meet the requirements, the advanced and the conventional requirements of the RFS for the next couple of years. Will some tweaks be necessary in a few years as the cellulosic, if the cellulosic delays continue? Perhaps, but I think that there's proven capacity and proven production to meet the goals that are in there now, and so we would just urge you guys to make those points as you're visiting with your lawmakers. And with that, unless anybody else had anything to add, I'd turn back over to you, Ken.
Great. Thanks, Ben. We're going to talk a little bit now about fiscal year 2015 funding for key programs that support alternative fuels and our agenda for the current year. Essentially, TEP's focus this year is going to be, and we'll talk a little bit in more detail about this, about our strategy, but one is to increase funding for the Clean Cities program, including more funding for competitive grants. Two, to increase funding generally for the DOE Vehicle Technologies program. Number three, to increase funding for the EPA Clean Diesel Grant program. And four, for critical Department of Agriculture programs that support biofuels. Here is a table which shows the President's proposed budget for vehicle technologies, the Vehicle Technologies program this year. And you can see the three columns. One shows the FY 2013 numbers, FY 2014, which is what we're in the middle of right now, and then 2015 is the budget process that we're just starting right now, which in FY 2015 will start on October 1st. So right now we're in the middle of fiscal year 2014. I think for those of you who are interested in the Clean Cities program, the important line here is near the bottom where it says outreach, deployment, and analysis. You can see there that for that line, there's about $31 million in the current fiscal year 2014. Out of that, $24 million is supporting the Clean Cities program and its various activities. And so generally, deployment is only a little bit more than 10% of the whole vehicle technology program budget, and the Clean Cities program is getting about $24 million total. And then you can see in the proposal for next year, the department is and the administration is proposing to increase that outreach and deployment, those programs considerably as a percentage of the overall program, which we think is a good thing. We think that the research and development is critical to the future of the industry, but also that the deployment funds are out there creating jobs and opportunities and helping folks put vehicles into action, purchase vehicles, put infrastructure into place around the country. And then a couple of highlights from their program. One, I think everybody's heard of the EV Everywhere Challenge. That's obviously a huge focus for the administration and the department. And this is largely research dollars, but also includes the workplace charging challenge, as well as efforts to deploy electric vehicle infrastructure in communities across the country. You can see some of the other fuels. Of interest, I think, is also the bottom line there, which is the alternative fuel vehicle community partner projects, which the administration is proposing. They actually proposed these last year as well. These are meant to be competitive grants to help partnerships at the local level accelerate the introduction and adoption of commercially available advanced technologies, and are very supportive of deployment projects for alternative fuels vehicles and infrastructure. So this would be is a good proposal, something that we support, and we'll look forward to seeing that how that proceeds in Congress. I also want to add that on the clean diesel program, which is something that people care about, unfortunately they did this last year and they did it again this year. The administration has requested, included in its budget, zero funding for the clean diesel grants. Fortunately, last year Congress stepped in and restored funding to $20 million at that level, and we'll be looking to Congress to do that again. But that's an important program to folks in the Clean Cities Coalitions and our industry, and have achieved a lot in terms of emissions reductions and also in terms of putting new vehicles, safer and cleaner vehicles on the road. Paul, before we get into kind of the process and stuff, is there anything you'd like to say about the budget proposals? Hello, Paul. Paul, are you on mute?
Yeah, I was on mute. Sorry. Ken, you hit everything right on the button. I don't have to add anything onto this. The only thing I already mentioned on the budget had to do with when Phil was talking regarding the tax credits.
The tax credits.
This looks good, and it's a good effort.
Great. So a big priority this year, and Transportation Energy Partners has done this in the past, in particular when the Clean Cities program was under attack. Transportation Energy Partners worked very hard up on Capitol Hill to make sure that people there knew the value of the Clean Cities program, and were able to restore funding. And then over a period of years, including under the Recovery Act, Transportation Energy Partners were aggressive advocates for increased funding for vehicle deployment, and this year we are going to engage in a strategy, an aggressive strategy, including at the Energy and Independence Summit, to push for an increase in the Clean Cities program this year. So we've already had some initial meetings with the House and Senate Appropriations Committee staff, and they're awaiting our proposals, which we're putting them together right now. As you can see from the schedule here, the timing of this year's Energy Independence Summit and our proposals to the House and Senate Appropriations Committees will be perfect. Essentially, we're going to propose an increase in the Clean Cities program, including an increase in funding for competitive grants for deployment. And our basic message is that research and development is critical, but it's also extremely important to make sure that some funding is out there for demonstrations and deployment activities if we're going to take these new technologies and advance them and truly get them into the marketplace in a significant way. So in terms of the budget process, one good thing I think, as I'm sure everybody knows, over the past couple of years, in terms of the budget, we've been going from crisis to crisis over the debt ceiling and short-term extensions of the budget, and we had a government shutdown, and it's been a mess, to be honest, here in Washington in terms of the budget, and a lot of the fights have been focused over the budget. The good thing is in December, when the deal was cut between the House and the Senate and the administration following the government shutdown, we now have basic agreement on the budget, overall budget numbers for the next 2 years, and so we're in a position where they can actually go back and do the appropriations process under a relatively normal order. I won't say anything is totally normal or regular here in Washington, because there are always surprises and politics are in play, and it is an election year. but I think we are on track to at least have some semblance of a normal appropriations process. And the way that works is the process starts when the president introduces his budget. That happened on March 4th. Those are some of the numbers we've been discussing. And then the next step is there will be hearings held by the appropriations committees and subcommittees where members of the administration and other parties will go up and talk about various programs in the budget. And then the appropriations subcommittees will actually begin considering legislation. The earliest it'll probably start this year will be in May in some subcommittees, but it'll really begin in the House in earnest in May and June, and the Senate probably won't start going in their subcommittees probably until June at the earliest. So right now is the perfect time to be talking to members of Congress about the appropriations process. After the bills go through committee, they will go to the floor in the summer and early fall, and the goal is to have them all done by September 30th, which is the end of the current fiscal year. That rarely happens. Hopefully a couple of bills will get done this year. My sense is that we'll see a lot more progress this year, but again, we probably won't see the complete wrap-up of this year's appropriations process until after the election. But I think there's a great opportunity to both restore funding for the EPA Clean Diesel program and to increase funding for the Clean Cities program, and that's going to be a big focus of our effort this year and during the upcoming Energy Independence Summit. So with that, I want to see if anybody, Paul, if you got anything you'd like to add there.
Yeah, this is Paul again. Ken, you did a great job again. The only thing I wanted to add on here is that members are not earmarking anymore. So the consideration of many of our subjects and our issues will have to be contained in some of the report language. So I think that's part of what TEP has been focusing on in their efforts in trying to encourage the agencies to spend more money on the Clean City program. And I think that's could also be one of your messages when, at least it'll be some of the messages of our members when we're doing our Hill visits, but we should keep that into consideration as well.
That's great. And then the other thing I think is it's going to be very important if we're going to be successful to have bipartisan support for our efforts. So we're going to really want to work with the coalitions that have active Republican leaders in particular on these issues and make sure that we have bipartisan support, continue to have bipartisan support for alternative fuels and vehicles, for the Clean Cities program and everything we're doing, and in particular for our efforts this year. So what I'd like to do now is if people have any questions, you can type them in to the question box. I'm going to take a few questions before we talk about take a few minutes to talk about preparing for Capitol Hill. So there's one question which says propane is included in all natural gas projects, correct? I'm not sure exactly what that question is getting at, but maybe you can talk about, Phil, in terms of, at least in terms of the tax incentives, how that propane is included in the incentives are similar to natural gas.
That's true, and what has been in place has been identical when it comes to the fuel tax credit and the infrastructure credit, and that's one of NPGA's primary policies, is to ensure parity among alternative fuels. I think that gives us the opportunity to argue for the tax incentives themselves, while at the same time not being boxed into preferring one over the other. So I think it keeps us positive. It keeps us from, it keeps the likelihood that somebody's going to be able to drive a wedge between a couple of the alternative fuels to a minimum. And it also keeps people like Paul and me on the same side of an issue. So that's always a good thing.
Great.
Yeah, I just wanted to add, Phil, you did right on. I just wanted to add on that is that there's a joint letter signed by our trade associations on the infrastructure credits that expired to make sure we get that 30% or $30,000 going for the extenders. And we're working on a similar effort for the fuel credit. And we do the same thing on the Hill. Hey, look, parity here. That's the whole thing. Actually, the whole thing with the Clean Cities program is fuel neutrality. You know, don't pick winners and losers.
Great. So again, if anybody's got questions, please type them in the question box, and we'll take your questions. I'm going to jump in since on getting ready for Capitol Hill Day. Again, for those of you who are coming to the Energy Independence Summit, on Tuesday we will be on Capitol Hill all day, and it's a great opportunity to educate members of Congress about what you're doing in your communities, and it really makes a difference. And it's also, not only does it make a difference, I think it's good for your organization, and something that you should be thinking about all the time through your work. It helps to build your organization. It helps to keep you relevant. It advances policies that support your members and stakeholders, and it helps to build long-term relationships with key policymakers who can be helpful to you and your organization. Policy making in general is a lot about relationships, and so the important goal here, I think, is for Clean Cities Coalitions and others is to seek to build long-term relationships with your members of Congress and other policymakers. So think about ways that you can help them, how you can be a good source of ideas and information. You can provide opportunities for visibility and media coverage for your elected officials. You can introduce them to key constituencies and community leaders. So you have a lot to offer them, just as they have a lot that they can do for you, and building those relationships will give you an opportunity to explore those partnerships and make them beneficial. And finally, I want to encourage people to build relationships, even with federal officials, with their local, state, and national offices. And you should be doing the same things with local government and state officials as well to enhance your organizations. And I know many of you do this very successfully on an ongoing basis. Finally, not finally, but to be effective in educating officials, one of the most valuable things is to connect with them about what's going on in their state or district. So one of your goals and our goals is to educate them about the great work that you're doing and the value and benefits of clean transportation policies and the advancements in the industry in your areas. So providing information, facts, and figures on how clean vehicles and fuels are creating jobs and benefiting your local area. And elected officials and their staff connect to examples of projects and programs that are on the ground and working. So bringing pictures of a new station with lots of vehicles lined up, taking advantage of them, showing pictures of fleets and how they're converting, providing examples of job creation in your district related to alternative fuels and vehicles. All these things can make you all and us collectively more effective as we speak with elected officials. And finally, it's important to demonstrate very broad-based local and regional and bipartisan support for what we're doing. The more we can do that, the more effective we're going to be. It's important when you meet with elected officials to follow up and follow through. If you don't know the answer to something that they ask you or they want some information, find it out, be a resource, get back to them, send thank you notes after the meetings, stay in touch regularly through your newsletters, reports, regular updates. Again, invite them to local events, groundbreakings, grand openings of stations, ride and drive events. You should invite your elected officials to all the public events that you do, workshops. You never know when they're going to come or when their staff is going to come, and the more they know about what you're doing and your program, the more they can help you. In terms of meeting preparation for those of you coming to Washington, this is very important. You should prepare a one-pager. We will provide information on policy priorities and background and talking points and all that kind of stuff, but you should prepare a one-pager that talks about your organization and gives a couple of examples of interesting and exciting projects that you're working on and the benefits of those. Bring visuals if you have them, maps, photos, pictures. It's always easier to have a conversation around visual displays at a meeting than it is around words on a piece of paper. Don't forget your business cards. Obviously be respectful and don't get interrupted by iPhones or other smartphones. And when you're on Capitol Hill, you're going to be walking a lot. So you should wear comfortable shoes. Very important.
Ken, this is Phil. I got something I'd like to add to that.
Yeah, please.
If you're planning on talking about tax credits or tax policy, you should definitely differentiate the members of Congress and senators that are on Finance or the Ways and Means Committee from the other members that you're going to be meeting with. What we find is that if you talk to a garden variety of member of Congress about a tax issue, they will generally buck they'll agree with you, and they'll thank you, and they'll be the nicest people in the world. But the meeting that you really want to focus in on the tax policy relates to those Ways and Means or Senate Finance people. So pay particular attention to the committees that those people are on, and spend a little extra time on the tax policy issues if you're talking to somebody on Ways and Means or Finance.
That's great. Very good advice. And if people need that information, they can contact me, and we'll help you out. For those people that we're scheduling meetings for, we're prioritizing the tax committees, as Phil mentioned, also the appropriations committees and the energy committees, because those are the key ones. In terms of specific, when you're in your meetings, on Capitol Hill, you should expect them to last usually at least 15 minutes and generally no more than 30 minutes. You should be able to make your pitch in really in 2 or 3 minutes at most, and make sure everybody gets a chance to talk in your group unless you got a huge group. So you should basically keep your pitch short and then leave plenty of time for questions and discussions. You should always have a specific request for action, whether that's increase funding for the Clean Cities program, extend the tax incentives, write the administrator of the Environmental Protection Agency about the renewable fuel standard or whatever, and we will help with that. And you can have a local request too. The request could be we're having a grand opening of a station in 3 weeks and we'd like the member of Congress to come to the event. But they want to know how they can help you. Phil just talked about this. Consider the office, know their committees and their background. Try and be more factual than emotional, though emotions can be helpful with some members of Congress. Know the opposition to the issues. so that you can respond to them. And even if you disagree with the member of Congress or their staff, or they disagree with you, you should still be respectful and respect their views. And you never know when you're going to have an opportunity to work cooperatively with someone. We'll send this out to people, and it'll be in materials here, but here's a sample that we found very effective in conducting meetings on the Hill, brief introductions, provide a couple of very specific local examples of clean fuels projects in action, and then give them your specific requests, and then leave time for discussion. And then in terms of transportation energy partners, we are helping folks that need it to schedule meetings. I know some of you are doing it on your own, but we're scheduling meetings for many coalitions and their teams. We will be assigning stakeholders to teams that want them. We found it's much more powerful if coalitions go in with industry partners. I know some of you are more sensitive about who goes with you, so if that's the case, please let us know. We will be sending out an email to that effect, and hopefully you will let us know so we can make the teams effective. We are providing talking points and handouts on the federal policy priorities, and then we'll send you shortly a sample local press release that you can use with your local press talking about your trip to Washington and what the focus is. So with that, I'm going to see if we have any more questions. Somebody provided this suggestion, which I think is good in your information and materials, which is provide information on how your coalition is leveraging federal dollars and leveraging projects. I know Mark Bentley and Philip Wiedmeyer in Alabama talk a lot about an ethanol E85 infrastructure project they did, where they used a small amount of federal dollars and I think some state dollars to put in about six or eight stations, and as a result of the work that they did, that leveraged private sector investment and the development of about 25 stations in Alabama, in addition to some in neighboring states. So that shows significant leverage and real value out of the federal investment in funding. I don't know if there are any other questions out there or comments. Let's see what else we got here. Here's another suggestion, which is when you speak to congressional offices, it's very valuable to have information on accomplishments that have resulted from the funding that's been received. And we will provide some summary. The question is there a high-level summary available? We'll provide a summary of the overall, the broader impacts of the program, which you all can use in your meetings. Anybody else have questions? Any of the other panelists? Paul or Ben, any comments?
No. I just want to commend you on an excellent job organizing this, Ken.
Yeah, thanks, Ken.
Yeah, absolutely. We appreciate everybody's support. I have one more thing. I think most of the coalitions know that TEP circulated a brief survey. A number of you have responded to it on your coming projects, and we want to use that for two reasons. We think it'll be very valuable in helping create new partnerships with some of our industry partners and a number of the sponsors at this year's summit. And then secondly, we think it'll be valuable as we communicate about the effectiveness of the program to policymakers. So for that, we're going to send out another notice about the survey. So if you haven't filled it out, it's very brief. It doesn't take very long. And we're asking, in addition to answering just a few questions, for about 3 to 5 examples of current or future projects that you're doing in your coalition region, and that's really valuable. Let's see if we have any other questions here. Let me ask you, remind people one more thing about if you haven't registered for the summit, the early bird registration, tomorrow's the last day. And if you haven't made your hotel room reservations, we lose our hotel block. We can't protect the rooms beyond tomorrow. So if you haven't registered for the summit, register for the summit. And if you have not made your hotel reservation yet, please do that all by tomorrow. So with that, we'll look forward to seeing everybody in Washington. Thanks for your participation. Special thanks to Paul Kirkhoven, Ben Evans, and Phil Square. These are some of the top experts in Washington on your issues, representing you all. And they're all doing a great job, and thanks for your generous time today. So thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Ken.
Thanks, Ken.
Thank you, and good day.